They found the legendary Deathworld ship. Humanity was already there. Part 1. The stars outside the viewport were cold and silent. They always were. But tonight, something was different. Commander Vale of the Galactic Union ship Saranova stood at the observation deck, her 4 blue eyes scanning the empty space ahead. She had been in deep space for 6 years. She had seen dying stars, ancient ruins, and worlds that breathed like living things, but nothing had prepared her for what her long-range scanner was now showing. A ship drifting alone. It was massive, bigger than anything the Union had ever built, bigger than anything any known species had ever built. The hull was dark metal, covered in scratches and burns that told a long and violent story. It had no lights, no engine flare, no signal. It just floated there, slow and heavy, like a dead giant sleeping in the dark. "Commander," said her first officer Drevin, stepping close. His voice was low, almost afraid. "Long-range scan confirms it. That is the cradle of ash." The whole bridge went quiet. Every person in that room had heard of the cradle of ash. Every person in the galaxy had. It was a legend, a story told to young children in the Union, not to scare them but to warn them. Hundreds of years ago, a Deathworld species had built it. A species so violent, so aggressive, so impossibly hard to kill, that the Union had voted to seal the ship away, to lock it in a dead region of space and never speak of it again. The species was gone now, or so everyone believed. "Get me a full sensor sweep," Vale said, keeping her voice calm even though her heart was pounding. "Every reading you can get. I want to know if that ship is truly dead." The crew moved fast. They were professionals. They had been trained for strange things, but their hands were shaking a little. Drevin came back 3 minutes later. His face was pale, which for his species meant something was very wrong. "Commander," he said quietly, "the ship is not dead." Vale looked at him. "There are life signs." "Yes," he paused as if he did not want to say the next part. "Thousands of them." The room was silent again, but this was a different kind of silence. This was the silence before something very bad happened. Vale did not panic. She had been a commander for 12 years. She knew that panic was the enemy of survival. She turned to her communications officer, a young Helvari named Seat, whose feathers were ruffled with fear. "Try to hail them," Vale said. "Every frequency. Use the Union's universal greeting protocol." Seat nodded and got to work. For a long time there was nothing, just static, just the soft hum of the ship and the breathing of her crew. Then something happened that no one expected. The cradle of ash responded. Not in any Union language, not in any language in the database, but there was a voice. It was low and rough, like stones being ground together, and it was speaking in a pattern, a real pattern, not random noise. "Can you translate it?" Vale asked. "Working on it," Seat said. His feathers were flat now. He was focused. "Good. The language is very old. I'm matching it against deep archive records." He stopped. He stared at his screen. He looked up at Vale. "Commander, this language is pre-Union. It is over 400 years old." "What are they saying?" Seat swallowed. "They're saying, identify yourself. You are approaching a protected vessel of the Terran Deep Fleet. State your purpose or be warned." No one moved. No one spoke. Terran, the word hit Vale like a fist. She knew that word. Everyone knew that word. It was the name the Deathworld species had used for themselves, humans, the ones who had built this ship, the ones who had supposedly vanished 4 centuries ago. Vale slowly turned to Drevin. She could see the same thought in his eyes that was in hers. Humans were not gone. Humans were still on that ship. It had started 3 months earlier, back on the Union's Central Station Pillar Prime. Vale had been sitting in a briefing room with 12 other commanders. All of them quiet, all of them reading the same report on their data pads. The report was marked with the highest level of secrecy the Union had, the kind of secrecy that meant if you told anyone your career was over. The report was about a signal coming from the deep dead zone at the edge of Sector 9. Zone the Union had closed off 400 years ago, right after the Human Wars, a zone that was supposed to be empty. The signal was not random noise. It had structure, it had meaning, and the Union's best scientists had confirmed it. The signal was artificial. Something in that dead zone was sending a message. Admiral Corrin had stood at the front of the room. He was old, very old. Old enough to remember when the human question was still fresh, still painful. He had looked at all of them with tired eyes. "We are sending a small fleet to investigate," he had said. "Not to engage, not to make contact if avoidable, just to observe and report. We need to know what is in that zone." He had looked directly at Vale then. "Commander Vale will lead the mission." She had accepted without hesitation. That was her way. You did not hesitate when the Admiral gave you a mission. You said yes, and then you went and you did it, and you tried not to think too hard about the parts that scared you. The part that scared her was the word human. She had read everything about them, every record the Union had kept, every battle report, every scientific study, every note written by explorers who had encountered them before the wars. And what she had read had stayed with her quietly, like a stone in her boot that she could never quite reach. Humans came from a world called Earth. Earth was what the Union called a Deathworld, a planet with extreme temperatures, heavy gravity, dangerous wildlife, and environments that would kill most species within hours. Species that evolved on Deathworlds were different, harder, tougher, more dangerous. But humans were not just tough, they were something else entirely. Every other Deathworld species the Union had ever found was aggressive. But simple, strong but predictable. Humans were different. Humans were creative. Humans were patient. Humans could be gentle and then be monsters in the same breath. They could look at a problem no one else could solve and find a way through it that no one else had thought of. They had built the Cradle of Ash to prove that. The Cradle of Ash was not just a warship, it was a world. Self-contained civilization, built to go anywhere, survive anything, and never need to come home. The Union had studied the design back when humans and the Union had still been, not friends but not enemies. Either the Union scientists had said it was impossible, no species could build something like that. Humans had built it anyway. Then the wars had come. Vale did not know all the details. No one living did. The records from that time were incomplete, damaged, or sealed. What she knew was that something had happened between the Union and humanity, something bad, something that had left both sides broken and bleeding, and in the end the humans had taken their great ship and they had gone into the dark, and they had not come back. Until now. Back on the bridge of the Serenova, Vale made a decision. "Reply to them," she said. "Use their language if you can. Tell them we are from the Galactic Union. Tell them we are not here to fight. Tell them we want to talk." Seat translated her words as best he could and sent the message. They waited. The reply came faster this time. Seat listened to it. He translated it slowly, making sure he had it right. "They say, we know who you are. We have been watching you for 3 days. You may approach, but only the command ship. Your escorts stay where they are. If they move, we will notice." 3 days. They had been watching for 3 days. Vale felt something. Cold moved through her. She had not known she was being watched. Her sensors had shown nothing, which meant whatever systems the humans had, they were far beyond anything in the Union's database. Drevin leaned close to her. "Commander, I recommend we pull back. This is beyond our mission parameters." "Our mission parameters say to investigate," Vale said quietly. "This is investigation. Going inside that ship alone is not investigation. It is walking into a den of unknown creatures and hoping they are friendly." Vale looked at him. "They could have fired on us already. They did not. They want to talk as much as we do, maybe more." She turned back to the view screen. The cradle of ash filled it now. Enormous and dark and real. She could see the scratches on its hull more clearly. She could see old weapon burns, repaired a dozen times. She could see the faint glow of lights behind some of the viewports. Deep inside that darkness, something lived, something that had survived 400 years alone in the dark. She wanted to know what that something was. "Tell the fleet to hold position," she said. "We are going in." As the Serenova moved slowly toward the massive ship, the bridge was quiet. The crew watched their screens. Some of them were afraid. Vale could tell she was afraid too, but fear was just information. It told you to be careful. It did not tell you to stop. The cradle of ash grew larger in the viewport, larger and larger, until it filled everything, until there was nothing else in the universe except that dark metal world waiting. A docking bay opened in its side. A light came on inside it, a soft, human kind of light. Vale took a slow breath. "Take us in," she said. The Serenova slipped into the bay like a small fish entering the belly of something ancient and enormous. The bay sealed behind them. Lights came on all around them, warm and yellow. Air cycled into the bay with a sound like the ship itself was breathing. And then the inner doors opened, and a human stepped through them. Vale had seen pictures, old ones, 400-year-old images from before the wars. She thought she knew what to expect. She did not. The human was tall, not the tallest species she had ever met, but tall. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head, skin the color of dark earth, eyes that were brown and sharp and very, very old for a face that looked young. He was wearing simple clothes, dark and practical. He carried no weapon that she could see, but he walked the way a person walked when they did not need a weapon, when they were the weapon. He stopped at the entrance to the docking bay and looked at the Serenova. Then his eyes found Vale standing at the top of the boarding ramp. He did not smile, he did not frown, he just looked at her with those old quiet eyes. And then he spoke, not in his old language, in standard Union trade. Accented and rough, but completely understandable. "You took your time," he said. "We sent that signal 8 months ago." Vale blinked. "You speak our language." "Some of us do." He tilted his head slightly. "I am Captain Jonas Reed. 3rd generation. Welcome to the cradle of ash." He paused. "We have been waiting a long time for someone to come." Vale walked down the ramp toward him. Her legs felt steady. Her heart did not. "Waiting for what?" she asked. He looked at her for a moment, and something moved behind those old eyes, something that might have been sadness or relief or both at once. "To go home," he said simply. The words landed in the quiet of the docking bay and stayed there. Vale did not know what to say. She had come expecting monsters or ruins or something dark and dangerous. She had not expected this. She had not expected a man who looked at her like she was the answer to a very old question. She had not expected humans who simply wanted to go home. Behind Jonas Reed, through the open inner doors, she could see people Real people, children running, adults talking, someone carrying a basket. Of food, life, an entire civilization, small and quiet and very much alive, tucked inside the bones of a legendary warship. Vale straightened her shoulders. "Tell me everything," she said. And the captain of the Cradle of Ash began to talk. They found the legendary Deathworld ship. Humanity was already there. Part 2. Jonas Reed led Vale through corridors that smelled like metal and cooking food and something she could not name, something warm and old. And human. The inside of the Cradle of Ash was not what she had expected. She had imagined a warship, bare walls, weapon storage, everything built for fighting. What she found instead was something that had grown past its original purpose. The corridors were wide, yes, and the bones of the ship were military, but the people who lived inside it had done what people always do. They had made it a home. There were drawings on some of the walls, children's drawings painted in bright colors. There were plants growing in pots along the hallway, edges green and leafy under artificial lights. There were names carved into door frames, dozens of them, like a record kept across generations. She saw food stalls selling things she did not recognize. She heard music coming from somewhere above her. People stopped and looked at her as she passed. Some were curious, some were wary, a few were afraid, but none of them ran and none of them threatened her, and that told her something important about what kind of community this was. "How many of you are there?" Vale asked. "About 42,000, Jonas said, leading her around a corner. "Give or take. We stopped counting exactly a long time ago. Hard to keep track when people keep being born. 42,000 on a ship in deep space for 400 years. "How did you survive?" she asked. "The ship," he said simply. "The original builders designed it to be completely self-sustaining, hydroponic farms, water recycling, power from a deep core reactor that has never stopped running, not once. The people who built this ship were very serious about not needing anyone else." There was something in his voice when he said it, not pride exactly. Something older than pride. He brought her to a room near the center of the ship. It was clearly a meeting room, large and circular, with a long table and chairs built for humans but adaptable. On the walls were maps, hundreds of them, star maps, route maps, maps of things she recognized and things she did not. 2 other humans were already there. One was a woman with silver hair and dark skin, and the kind of stillness that meant she had seen a great deal and processed it all. The other was a younger man with a round face and nervous hands who kept touching the edge of the table. "This is Elder Mara," Jonas said, nodding to the woman. "She leads our council, and this is Theo, our head archivist." "Commander Vale," the elder said. Her standard union was cleaner than Jonas's, almost accent-free. "Please sit, we have much to discuss." Vale sat. Her aide, a young officer named Pris, sat beside her, datapad ready. Pris was trying to look calm. She was not succeeding. "I will not waste your time with formalities," Elder Mara said. "We know the Union. We know its politics. We know it has not changed as much as it would like to believe, so let me be direct with you." Vale nodded. "Please." 412 years ago, our ancestors left the Union, Mara said. Her voice was steady. "They did not leave because they wanted to. They left because the choice was leave or be destroyed. The Union was afraid of us, not without reason perhaps. We were difficult in those days, but we were not monsters." Vale said nothing. She had read the history, or what passed for history. She knew there were many things the Union's records did not say clearly. The original crew of this ship numbered 112,000, Mara continued. "By the time we reached the dead zone, we had Lost almost a third of them. Disease, fighting among ourselves. Despair, she paused. It is very hard to be alone in space for a very long time. But you survived, Vale said. We adapted, Mara said. We changed. We built something here that we had not had before. Community, real community, not held together by politics or alliances, but by the simple fact that we only had each other. She looked at Vale steadily. What we built here is worth something, we know that, but we are also tired. The archivist Theo spoke for the first time. His voice was younger, but his eyes had the same weight as the others. We have been trying to send a signal for over a century. The ship's long-range communications were damaged in the early years. We only got them working properly 8 months ago. And you sent it to us, Vale said. We sent it everywhere, he said, but yes, we hoped the Union would hear it first. Why? Vale asked. There was a brief silence. Because, Jonas said, if someone else found us first and came to this ship with weapons, things would go very badly for them. Vale looked at him. She remembered that humans, even ones who wanted peace, had come from a death world. She remembered what the records said about human response to threats. She chose her next words carefully. Is that a warning? It is a fact, Jonas said. His voice was not cold, it was just honest. We have 42,000 people on this ship. Almost everyone here has grown up knowing that the outside universe is dangerous. They have been trained to protect themselves, and this ship since they were old enough to walk. If an enemy fleet found us first, they would not find a peaceful vessel of lost civilians. They would find 42,000 people who have had 400 years to think about how to defend this ship and nothing else to do. He held her gaze. We do not want war, we never did, but we are very good at it if it comes for us. Vale believed him. She also noticed that he had said this not to threaten her but to make clear to her what was at stake. He was telling her, handle this right, do not make this go wrong. What do you want from the Union? She asked. Mara answered. Recognition, she said. We want to be recognized as a people, not a threat, not an anomaly, a people with rights, with a home. We want to be able to return to Union space, to live on a planet again, to let our children grow up under open sky. Her voice was very controlled, but something moved under it, something that had been held tight for a very long time. Some of our people have never left this ship. They were born here. They will die here unless someone opens a door. Vale thought about that. She thought about the children she had seen in the corridor, born on a ship, living their whole lives inside metal walls under artificial lights, never seeing a real sunrise, never feeling real wind. I cannot make promises on behalf of the Union, she said honestly. I am a commander, not a diplomat, not a council member. We know, Mara said, but you are here. That is already more than we have had. Vale looked at the maps on the walls. She looked at the names carved into the door frame she had passed. She looked at the archivist's nervous hands and the captain's old eyes and the elder's careful voice. She thought about the 42,000 people on the ship. She thought about what it meant to survive 400 years in the dark. She thought about what kind of people they must have become. She thought about what kind of choice she was being asked to carry back to the Union. Tell me more about your history, she said. Everything you remember. Everything your archives have. I want to understand what happened 400 years ago from your side. The archivist Theo looked startled, then grateful. He opened a case he had been keeping close to him and pulled out a data drive. Old technology, but solid. I have been preparing this for 11 years, he said, since I was 18. Every record we have, Every log, every personal journal, every piece of footage that survived. He set it on the table between them. This is everything we are. Vale looked at the drive. She thought about 112,000 people getting on a ship and leaving everything they knew because the alternative was worse. She thought about the ones who had not made it through the first year. She thought about the ones who had been born on this ship and never known anything else. She thought about the ones who were alive right now. 42,000 of them, who had sent a signal into the dark and waited 8 months to know if anyone was listening. She picked up the drive. "Then let me learn who you are," she said. She spent 3 days on the cradle of ash. She had not planned to. She had planned to make contact, gather data, and return to the Union fleet, but something kept her there. Maybe it was the history she read in the evenings, sitting in the small room they had given her, working through Theo's archive with a kind of hunger she had not expected. Maybe it was the conversations she had with people in the corridors, the ones who stopped to ask her questions with a boldness that she found both startling and refreshing. Humans asked direct questions. She had known that from the records, but reading it was different from experiencing it. A small girl of perhaps 7 years had walked up to her in the hydroponic garden and said, with complete seriousness, "Are you going to take us somewhere with trees?" Vale had not known what to say. "I am going to try," she had finally answered. The girl had considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said, "I want to climb one. My grandmother said they were good for climbing." She had walked away after that, back to a group of other children, and Vale had stood there in the artificial light between rows of growing plants and felt something shift inside her chest, something that had not moved in a long time. On the evening of the second day, Jonas found her sitting in one of the ship's observation rooms, a long, wide room with a curved viewport that looked out at the stars. She had come there to think. She had stayed because the stars looked different from inside this ship than they did from the Serenova. She could not explain why they were the same stars, but something about looking at them from inside a place that had been alone for 400 years made them feel different. He sat down in a chair a few feet away and looked at the stars too. They were quiet for a while. It was an easy quiet, the kind that meant neither of them needed to fill it. "What made you become a captain?" she asked eventually. He thought about it. "I didn't choose it exactly," he said. "My mother was captain before me, her father before her. We go back to the original crew." He paused. "I grew up knowing this ship, every corridor, every problem, every person." He looked at the stars. "When she died, it was just what I did next." "You miss her," Vale said. "Every day," he said simply. She thought about her own mother back on the Union homeworld. She had not spoken to her in 2 years. The mission had taken her too far out. Communications took months each way. "Do your people understand what it will mean?" she asked. "If the Union agrees to take you back, it will not be simple. There will be politics. There will be people who are afraid of you. There will be arguments and delays and things that take much longer than they should." "We know," Jonas said. "We've had 400 years to think about what going home would look like." He looked at her. "We don't expect it to be easy. We just expect it to be possible." Vale looked at him. "I will do everything I can," she said, and she meant it. He looked back at the stars. "That's enough," he said quietly. "That's more than enough." They found the legendary Deathworld ship. Humanity was already there. Part 3. The journey back to Pillar Prime took 6 weeks. Vale spent most of it writing. She wrote reports, yes, official ones for the Admiral and the Union Council, but she also wrote something else. Something she had never written before in her career. She wrote about People, she wrote about a little girl who wanted to climb trees. She wrote about a captain with old eyes who had inherited a world from his mother. She wrote about an archivist who had spent 11 years preparing a history that he hoped someone would someday read. She did not know if anyone would read those personal notes, but she wrote them anyway. The official report she sent ahead of the ship, encrypted at the highest level. She kept the message short and careful. She knew how the Union Council would react to the words "humans are alive." She knew there would be fear before there would be understanding. There always was. Admiral Corrin's reply came 4 days later. It was short too. Come directly to Pillar Prime. Speak to no one. She arrived to find 3 council members waiting for her, along with the admiral and a legal officer, and 2 diplomats who looked like they had not slept in days. They brought her into a sealed room and they talked for 11 hours straight. They asked the same questions over and over, in different ways, as if hopping to catch her in a contradiction. Are you certain there are humans? How many? What is the condition of the ship? Are they armed? Are they hostile? What do they want? Vale answered every question with patience. She had to work to maintain. She had known this would happen. She had prepared for it, but knowing a thing and living through it were different. It was exhausting to watch. People who had power over the decision spend so much time on fear and so little time on understanding. On the second day, she did something she had not planned to do. She put the data drive on the table. This is 11 years of archival work, she said. Every record the humans on the Cradle of Ash have kept since they left Union space 4 centuries ago. Personal journals, medical records, birth and death records, agricultural logs, educational records, everything. She looked at the council members. I ask that you read it before you make any decision, not the summary, the whole thing, as much of it as you can. The council members looked at the drive. One of them, a very old counselor named Ven, reached out and picked it up. He turned it over in his hands. You feel strongly about this, he said. I do, Vale said. He looked at her. He had been on the council for 40 years. He had seen many things. Tell me why, not the official reason, the real one. Vale thought about the little girl in the hydroponic garden. She thought about the names carved into door frames. She thought about 42,000 people who had been born into a darkness they had not chosen and had made light there anyway. Because they are not what the old records say they are, she said. They were never what the old records said, and we owe it to them and to ourselves to find out who they actually are before we decide what to do about them. Ven nodded slowly. He set the drive down in front of him with the kind of care you gave something important. I will read it, he said. Back on the Cradle of Ash, things were not quiet. Jonas Reed stood in the council chamber and listened to 11 different people talk at once. This was not unusual. The Council of the Cradle was elected from the ship's 42 residential sections, and when something important happened, all 11 of them came together and all 11 of them had opinions. Right now the important thing was, what were the Union people doing and how long would it take? We should have sent more than one ship with them, said Counselor Doris, a woman with gray-streaked hair and a voice like a speaker system, just as an escort, just to show strength. Showing strength to the Union is the last thing we want to do, said Counselor Park, younger, quieter. The whole reason our ancestors were pushed out was because the Union was afraid of what we could do. We don't want to remind them of that. So we sit here and wait, Doris demanded, like we've been sitting and waiting for 400 years. We wait because we have something worth waiting for, Jonas said. Room got quieter, not silent, not immediately, but quieter. He had that Effect, not because he was loud or angry, but because people trusted him to say things that were true. He stood up slowly. He was not a big man, but he stood like someone who had been carrying weight for a long time and had learned how to do it without being crushed. Commander Vale is carrying our case to the Union Council, he said. She is honest, I believe that. She told us she cannot make promises. And she kept that honesty. That means when she does make a promise, we can believe it. He looked around the room. What we need to do now is prepare not for war, for arrival. The room was quiet now. We need to think about what we want, he continued. Not just the big things, not just recognition and rights, the real things. What planet do we want to live on? What kind of community do we want to build? What do we keep of what we have built here? And what do we leave behind when we step off this ship for the last time? He paused. Because that day is coming, he said. I believe that, and I want us to be ready for it. There was a long silence. Then Doris, who was not a soft woman and had never been, said something that surprised everyone in the room. I want to see rain, she said. Real rain, not the misting system in the greenhouse. Real rain from a real sky. It was such a small thing, such a human thing, and it broke something open in the room. They talked for 3 more hours, not about politics, not about strategy, about real things, about what they missed that they had never had, about what their parents and grandparents had told them about world they had never seen, about what they wanted their children to grow up knowing. Jonas sat and listened and made notes. He had always been a man who listened more than he talked. His mother had taught him that. She had told him that the most important thing a leader could do was make space for people to say the true things they were afraid to say. When the meeting ended, Theo caught up with him in the corridor. Do you really think it will happen? Theo asked. He was 29 years old and had been born on the ship and had never known anything else. He had given his life's work to the hope that someday someone would read it and understand. Jonas looked at him. He thought about the commander's eyes when she had taken the data drive, the way she had held it, the way she had said she would do everything she could. Yes, Jonas said, I really think it will happen. Theo looked at him for a moment, searching his face. Okay, he said finally, okay, and he went back to his archive room and sat down and kept working because that was what Theo did. He kept the record, he kept the story alive. On Pillar Prime, Counselor Venn read for 2 days straight. He read the logs of the original captain, a woman named Commander Alicia Torres, who had written every night during the first year, when things were at their hardest, when people were dying and the ship was struggling, and she was trying to hold 100,000 people together. With nothing but words and will, he read the medical records from the plague years, 3 separate outbreaks, each one a crisis that should have ended them and did not. He read the educational logs, the curriculum the humans had built for their children, when it became clear they would be on the ship for generations, the careful thought they had put into what knowledge to pass on and how. He read the birth records. One entry stood out to him, written by a midwife 300 years ago, in the middle of the 3rd generation. Born this morning, healthy girl, 7 pounds. Her name is Maria. She has never seen a star from outside. She does not know yet that she has never seen one. All she knows is that she is here and she is loved. Vin sat with that for a long time. He was old. He had spent his whole career dealing with politics, with strategy, with the kind of problems that had no good answers, only less bad ones. He had not expected a data drive from a legendary Deathworld ship to make him feel like crying. He went to the Admiral. We are going to do this right, he said. It was not a question. Corin looked at him. You've read it. I've read it. Vin set the drive on the desk between them. These are not the monsters we were afraid of. They are not even the difficult allies we remembered. They are something we built together 400 years ago and then abandoned. And they survived, Admiral. They survived. Because that is what humans do. He looked at the drive. We are going to bring them home. Corin was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Then, he said, we need to send Commander Vale back with an answer. They found the legendary Deathworld ship. Humanity was already there. Part 4. Vale returned to the Cradle of Ash 7 weeks after she had left it. She came with a larger fleet this time, not warships, civilian transports and medical ships and diplomatic vessels, all flying the Union flag alongside something new, a flag that had been made for this moment in a small design office on Pillar Prime by someone who had stayed up all night to get it right, blue and white and deep black with a shape in the center that humans had once used as their symbol. Circle, simple, old. She did not know if the humans would recognize it, but she hoped they would. When the fleet dropped out of jump at the edge of Sector 9, the Cradle of Ash was where she had left it, still dark, still enormous, still carrying 42,000 lives inside its metal bones. Hail them, she said to Seat. This time, the response came in less than 30 seconds. Jonas Reed's voice filled the bridge. Commander Vale, we were wondering when you'd be back. She almost smiled. I brought people who want to talk properly this time, with authority to make real decisions. A pause, then how many? Enough, she said. Another pause, longer. She imagined him on his bridge or in the council chamber looking at the fleet on his screen and calculating. She had learned enough about him to know he would be calm. He was always calm. It was the kind of calm that came from having been through a great many things that were not calm at all. Send your diplomats, he said. We'll make room. The negotiations began the next morning. They took place in the Cradle's largest common room, a big open space, usually used for community gatherings that smelled like food and had art on the walls made by many different hands over many different generations. The Union diplomats Vale noticed kept looking at the art. It was hard not to. There was something about it that made it difficult to see these people as a threat. The lead diplomat from the Union was a tall, careful man named Envoy Sareth. He was good at his job. He was polite and precise and never said more than he needed to. He sat across from Elder Mara and they began with the formal things: recognition of personhood, rights under Union law, the legal status of the ship itself. Vale sat to the side and watched. It was not easy. Nothing like this was ever easy. There were things both sides had to give up, things both sides did not want to give. The Union wanted certain limits on the Cradle's military capability. The humans pushed back, not because they wanted war, but because the ship was their home and they did not want to be left defenseless in a galaxy that had already pushed them out once. That argument went on for 3 days. On the evening of the second day, Jonas found Vale in the corridor. Outside the meeting room, she had stepped out to get some air. He had stepped out to think. Sareth is worried about the weapons systems, Vale said. I know, Jonas said. Are they as extensive as our scans suggest? He looked at her sideways. It was almost a smile, but not quite. Our ancestors built this ship to survive anything. They built everything twice. The weapons are part of the ship. You cannot separate them from the structure without taking the ship apart. Can you disable them? Some of them, not all. He looked at the wall. Someone had painted a forest scene there long ago, deep greens and browns, the kind of painting someone made when they missed something very much. But I can. Make a promise, and my promises mean something on this ship. What kind of promise? The same kind our ancestors should have made 400 years ago. He said that we will not start a war, that if we are threatened we will defend ourselves, but we will not be the ones who swing first. That we want to be part of the Union, not in opposition to it. He paused. That's worth more than disabling a weapon. Vale thought about this. Sareth needs something on paper, she said. Then put it on paper, Jonas said. We'll sign it, all 42,000 of us if you want, but what you are really asking for is trust. And trust is not built with documents. Trust is built by doing what you said you would do. He looked at her. We have been doing that for 400 years. We survived. We stayed together. We did not become monsters. That's our record. Look at it. Vale went back into the meeting room the next morning and said almost exactly that to Sareth. Sareth was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I need to make a call to Pillar Prime. He came back 2 hours later. The council has agreed to a provisional treaty, he said, on the condition that the Cradle of Ash moves to a designated transit zone within Union-adjacent space, where it can be properly monitored during the integration period, a period of no less than 1 year and no more than 5, depending on how the process goes. He slid the document across the table. Mara read it. She read it a second time. She turned to Jonas. She turned to the other council members who had gathered in the room by this point, drawn by instinct or by someone quietly sending a message. No one spoke for a long time. Then Mara picked up the pen. Her hand was not quite steady. It had been steady for as long as anyone in the room had known her, and it was not steady now. She signed. One by one the others signed too. Jonas was last. He held the pen for a moment before he put it to the page. He thought about his mother. He thought about her mother. He thought about Alicia Torres writing in her log every night during the first terrible year, keeping the record alive, because she believed someone would someday read it and understand. He signed. The room was very quiet. And then Doris, who had sat in the back of the room with her arms crossed for the last 3 days, said in her very loud voice, Does anyone else need to cry, or is it just me? Several people laughed. Several people cried. Several people did both at once. Vale, sitting against the wall with her datapad forgotten in her hands, felt something move through her that was not a Union feeling. It was not a professional feeling. It was the feeling of watching something that had been broken for a very long time begin, very slowly, to be put back together. The ship moved the next day. Not far, just to the edge of the designated zone as agreed, but it moved. For the first time in over a century, the Cradle of Ash changed course, not because it was lost, not because it was running, because it was going somewhere. Vale stood in the observation room and watched it happen. Jonas stood beside her. How does it feel? She asked. He thought about it for a moment. Like the first day of something, he said, I have been preparing for the last day of something for a long time. I did not think about the first day enough. Good first days are harder than good last days, Vale said. Last days you can plan for, first days happen to you. He considered that. My grandmother used to say something like that. She said the best moments are the ones that surprise you. Vale looked at the stars outside the viewport. She thought about how different they looked now from how they had looked when she had arrived at this ship 6 weeks ago. Same stars, everything else different. What happens to the ship, she asked, after when people start to leave? He was quiet for a moment. Some of them will want to stay, he said. This is home. For some people it will always be home. I think the ship Stays, he looked at the metal walls around him, the art, the carvings. The 400 years of a people's life pressed into every surface. It should stay. It's too important to let go of. A monument, Vale said. A living one, he said, full of people who choose to live here because they want to, not because they have to. He smiled, and it was a real smile, the first one she had seen from him. It changed his face completely, made him look younger. My grandmother always said there was a difference between a prison and a home, even if they looked the same. From the outside, Vale looked at the cradle of ash around her. It does not look like a prison, she said. No, he agreed, not anymore. They found the legendary Deathworld ship. Humanity was already there. Part 5. The integration year was not quiet. It was never going to be quiet. Vale had known that. She had known it. From the moment she had watched the council sign that treaty and felt the relief and the fear mixed together in the room. Treaties were easy. Living up to them was the hard part. The trouble started in the Union's civilian media 3 weeks after the treaty was announced. Someone had leaked the existence of the cradle of ash, not the details, not the treaty, just the fact. Humans are alive. 42,000 of them, on a legendary Deathworld ship, coming back to Union space. The reaction was exactly what Vale had predicted and hoped would not happen. Fear, loud, public, irrational fear. Some Union citizens had never heard of humans. They were 400 years gone, after all. A historical footnote, if that, but others had heard the stories, the old ones, the ones that got worse with every telling. Humans had destroyed entire fleets. Humans could survive anything. Humans were savage and unpredictable, and the Union had been right to push them out. None of this was completely true. None of it was completely false. And that was the most dangerous kind of story, the kind with just enough truth in it to make the fear feel reasonable. On Pillar Prime, protests appeared outside the council building. They were small at first, then they were not. Vale was called back to Pillar Prime again. She sat in the same sealed room with the same council members, but the atmosphere was different. Now the careful consideration of before was gone. Now they were managing a problem. We need to slow down the process, one counselor said. We need to stop the process, said another. If we stop the process, Vale said very carefully, we break the treaty, and breaking the treaty with humans who have 42,000 trained defenders and a weapons system that your best scientists still cannot fully map is a decision you should think about very carefully. The room was quiet. I am not threatening anyone, she added. I am telling you what Jonas Reed himself told me. They do not want war. They have never wanted war. But they will defend themselves if they have to, and more importantly, if we break this treaty, we will have earned every bad thing they have ever thought about us. Ven, who had been listening from the corner, spoke up. She is right. He said, we made a promise, we should keep it. The counselor who had suggested stopping the process looked at him. You have read their files, Ven. You know what they are capable of. I have read their files, Ven agreed. I have read 40 years of a midwife's birth records. I have read the educational plans they built for a generation of children who had never seen a planet. I have read the grief counseling notes from after the plague years, 3 different plagues, and not one of them gave up. He looked at the counselor calmly. I know exactly what they are capable of. That is why we should not break our word to them. The debate went on for 2 days. In the end, the council did not stop the process, but they added conditions. More monitoring, more restrictions on movement during the first year, more checkpoints, more security measures, more layers between the humans, and full integration. Vale went back to the cradle of ash and told them. She had expected anger, she had prepared for it. She sat in the council chamber across from Jonas and Mara, and 11 council members, and she laid it all out honestly, without softening it. The room was quiet when she finished. Then Jonas said, "How many of these conditions are permanent?" "None of them," she said. "They are all time-limited, year 1 maximum. If the integration is going well, they fall away. And if the union decides they are not going well, then we renegotiate," she said. "But Jonas, I want to be honest with you. The fear is real. I know it is not fair. I know it is not based on who you actually are. But fear does not care about fairness, and if we push too hard too fast, we lose the people who are on our side, the ones who have already read your history, the ones who are arguing for you right now in a room on Pillar Prime." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then," he said at last, "he is still arguing for us." "He has not stopped," she said. Jonas looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He was thinking. She could tell he was not the kind of man who decided things quickly when they mattered. "All right," he said, "we accept the conditions." Mara looked at him. "Jonas." "We accept them," he said again, gently. "We have waited 400 years. We can wait a little longer to do this right." The little girl's name was Sana. Vale found that out 4 months later, when the first group of humans was allowed to make planetfall, not as residents, not yet, as visitors. A carefully chosen group of 30, allowed to visit one of the Union's outer worlds for 1 week under supervision, as part of the integration evaluation. Sana was one of them. She was 7 years old. She had brown eyes and short black hair, and she walked with the kind of serious focus that small children used when they were trying to look braver than they felt. The outer world was called HFY. It was not the most beautiful planet in the Union. It was green and cool and a little bit rainy, which in Vale's opinion made it exactly right for this. When the shuttle landed and the door opened, the 30 humans came out. One by one, some of them stopped at the top of the ramp and just stood there. Some of them went quickly down the steps and knelt on the ground. One man put his face into the grass and stayed there for a long time. Sana walked down the ramp and stopped at the bottom and looked up. The sky was gray with clouds. Rain was coming. A wind moved through the grass around her. She spread her arms out to the sides, palms up, like she was trying to hold as much of the air as she could. It started to rain, soft, small rain, the kind that barely felt like anything. Sana tilted her head back and let it fall on her face. Vale was standing 20 meters away, with a Union observer, and she watched this happen and felt something very large and very quiet move through her. After a long time, Sana lowered her head and looked around. She saw Vale. She walked toward her through the grass, rain spotting her hair. "Is this what rain feels like?" she asked. "Yes," Vale said. "That's what rain feels like." Sana thought about it. "It's colder than I thought," she said, "but nicer." She turned and ran back toward the other humans. She found a tree at the edge of a small grove nearby and looked at it for a moment, studying it seriously. Then she started climbing. 3 years passed. They were not easy years. There were arguments and setbacks and moments when it seemed like the whole process might collapse under the weight of fear and politics. There were protests on both sides. There were members of the Union who never accepted the humans and never would. There were humans on the cradle who never trusted the Union and never would. But the process did not collapse. It bent sometimes. It slowed, but it held. Humans began moving to Union worlds in small groups, then larger ones. Not all of them. Many stayed on the ship. Jonas had been right about The cradle of ash stayed active, crewed by people who had chosen it, but it stayed in Union-adjacent space now, docked near a small orbital station that had been built specifically as a connection point between the ship and the wider galaxy, a bridge. Theo the archivist made that his home. He moved to the station and set up a proper archive there, open to anyone. Humans came to tell him their stories. Union researchers came to study his records. He became, over time, one of the most visited and most important figures in the whole integration process, not because he was powerful, but because he had the story, and the story was what everyone needed to understand. Doris moved to a planet with a lot of rain. She sent Jonas a message every few months describing what the rain felt like. Each description was different. He kept everyone. Mara moved to Pillar Prime. She became an advisor to the council, not an elected member. She was too old and too direct for politics, but an advisor. She sat in rooms with powerful people and told them things they did not want to hear in a voice that made it very hard to ignore. Ven liked her enormously. They had lunch together every week and argued about history and usually disagreed, and always left feeling better for it. Jonas stayed on the cradle. He had known he would. It was not a sad thing. He had thought it might be sad, and it was not. The ship was different now, quieter in some ways, but it was his home, and it was still full of people, and it was still where he woke up in the morning and made coffee in the small kitchen his mother had used, and stood at the viewport and looked at the stars. Except now the stars were different. Now when he looked at them he could see other ships out there, Union ships and human ships and ships that carried both. He could see the station lit up and busy. He could see, if he used the long-range screen, the distant glow of planets where his people were living under open skies. He thought about his mother a lot in those years. She had died believing it would never happen. She had worked for it her whole life, sending signals and keeping the ship running and holding the community together and doing everything she could to make it possible. And she had died not knowing if any of it had worked. He wished she could see it. He wished it with a quiet, deep ache that never quite went away. But he had learned over the years that some aches were worth carrying, that some grief was the price you paid for loving something, and the price was worth it. Vale retired from active command 4 years after the treaty. She had not planned to retire so soon, but something had changed in her during the years of the integration, and she found she did not want to be in deep space anymore. She wanted to be where things were happening, where people were building something. She moved to HFY. It was still a little rainy. She had come to like that. She set up a small office near the Integration Coordination Center and started doing work she could not have named when she was a commander. She helped humans navigate Union bureaucracy. She helped Union citizens understand human customs. She answered questions, solved problems, sat with people who were afraid or angry or confused, and helped them find a way through it. She was not especially good at politics. She was very good at people. One afternoon, she was sitting outside her office when a group of human children ran past, chasing each other through the grass. They were mixed up with a few Union children, all of them running together with the complete and total focus that children brought to any game that involved running. She watched them and thought about Sana, standing in the rain with her arms out. She did not know if Sana was in this group. She did not know where Sana was now. She was 10, maybe 11, old enough to be a different person than she had been. One of the running children, a small girl with short dark hair, stopped suddenly and pointed at something in the grass. The other children crowded around. Then very carefully the girl reached down and picked up a small creature, something like a large insect with bright wings, and held it up to the light. The other children went quiet looking at it. Then the girl opened her hands and the creature flew away, and all of them watched it go there. Faces turned up to follow it until it was too small to see. And then they ran again. Vale sat and watched them run and felt, very clearly and very simply, that something had been fixed, not perfectly, not forever. Nothing was ever fixed perfectly or forever. But something that had been broken for 400 years had been mended, one careful piece at a time, by people who had not given up. She thought about Jonas on his ship, drinking his morning coffee and looking at the stars. She thought about Ven, in his office on Pillar Prime, still reading. She thought about the little girl with her arms out in the rain. She thought about Alicia Torres, writing in her log every night during the first terrible year, believing without evidence that someone would someday read it and understand. Someone had. The sky over Heva was gray and cool, and the wind moved through the grass, and somewhere above the clouds, a ship full of people who had survived 400 years of darkness was still there, watching. Ready loved. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.